So, welcome back to the Go Defenders, the Babysitters Club edition.
Yes, sir.
This is
Babysitters Club edition.
My brother Ev has little Savannah with him,
Hey, Savannah.
and she is a budding podcaster. It looks to be, as precocious as she may be.
big words today. Precocious.
Word.
I mean, come on, I'm not smart. I don't
You
got
are very
words. I
smart.
got
That is
words.
Mr. Brain over there.
I got words. I got words.
Mr. Brain.
You know, so we have the same format. We have the same guests that we had on the last episode. We have Mr. Jewel Mitchell to the left of me. We have Foosty MC to the right of me. And coming back for her second go round on the Go Defenders is Briahna Gatlin.
BG.
How you feeling today? You feeling good?
I'm chilling, man. We've been chilling. So we got some good things to talk about. I'm excited about that.
We do. So with this episode, one of the things that we wanted to address was reparations, right? And so this conversation first started when in our group chat we were sharing videos from Killer Mike's appearance on Bill Maher's show on HBO. And so Killer Mike, if for those who didn't see it, he said something to the effect of that the war on drugs deserves a separate reparation, and that he felt as though the marijuana industry, which now has been legalized in most states, he said that should go, state by state to African Americans. He said at least 35% should go to African Americans in each state in which marijuana has been legalized and the war on drugs was in effect.
Yeah.
And then, there was an interesting conversation that's been going on just even within the presidential debates and all of I can't even count all the candidates that are still in the race. I think the question has been asked as a talking point to most of them about do they believe in reparations? And so I thought it was like a fitting point to bring to the table and to the podcast to think about just like, what is it that we want out of reparations? And then B, like, where would we take those resources from? And thinking about us as African Americans, we have a troubled past, a troubled history, almost a muddled history to where we don't even almost always don't even know where we came from, per se. We're guessing to a certain degree. And how do we reconcile that in a way in which we'll get compensated fairly? And what does that look like, right?
So I just want to say this. Is there compensation for completely stripping someone of who they are?
Well, I mean, I think Jewel, you presented some interesting points before we even got on camera. I wish I could have had them on camera, but like,
What's that?
the idea of reparations and the idea that like, okay, as a people, African Americans have been stripped of who they are. What does compensation even look like?
What does that look like?
All right. Well, let's move.
It's a heavy joint. It's
Such
heavy.
a heavy question.
It's heavy.
Well, let's back up. I think we have to, you gotta. This is like an onion. And I think you gotta kind of peel back
layers off.
in layers. The first layer is when you say stripped. I think we have to be careful when we talk about reparations because I think generally when we're talking about reparations, it's within an economic construct, right? As if there's when we talk of compensation or we talk of some form, we're usually thinking of that in some economic sense. So to begin an economic discussion, which is what you are saying, we have to be very careful. We take it from that perspective wholeheartedly, right? So when we talk about it in those terms, essentially what we are saying is there was free labor provided to the slave owners of this country for a couple hundred years. It'll continue to be provided as well, but particularly in the case of American slavery, for a couple hundred years, and then so forth and so on, things that occurred after that slavery ended, after the Civil War. Should there be some compensation paid? I think that's what we're trying to address today, right? So the natural thought is clearly there is an economic value to what occurred to the Black existence in America. That value can be calculated roughly, but calculated nevertheless, right? So the question just becomes, the ideology is, should we benefit the ancestors of those people who created this value? Should we benefit from it, and how should we?
Well, you said something a little bit before we got on camera about the gross national product. I think our listeners would benefit from understanding that. You said
so at the time
Black folks represented about 60% of the gross national
at the time
product.
this Civil War ended in 1864, slaves accounted for in excess of 60% of the nation's gross domestic product.
That's crazy.
Wow.
60%.
Over
Yeah.
60%.
Wow.
And we ain't get shit?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Wow. That is
Over
something that I
60%.
did not
You
know.
have to realize there were,
Yeah.
at the time, there was about 2.5 million slaves in the South, I believe. It was over 2 million. And so we accounted for the value of a slave, just to kind of put it in context. What people don't realize is even in the 1800s, a slave was, $1,500-$1,600.
Yes, and that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
$1,500-$1,600 in today's terms is a decent
like-
amount of money.
Yeah,
So imagine what that equated to in $1,800.
Right.
That's like
Yeah.
100,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking a few hundred
But
thousand
I
dollars.
want to
Yeah.
clue in on something because
Wow.
Naledge told me that we were going to be talking about reparations, and I just did a little bit of research before I got here, and it says that I think a white household income versus a black household income, they make a normal, regular white household income. They make 10 times as much as a actual a black regular household income, which means we're 10 times behind where we should be. So just imagine
economically right.
if we actually did benefit off of slavery as a black household, where will we be and how far along will we be? And so when you get back to that reparation, it's like now if you fast forward how it's affected the entire the black family structure. It has affected us in so many different angles that there's not one way that it can be compensated. I mean, money is one thing, but can we? What about our moral values? What about all the mental PTSD that we've suffered just in that time?
Right.
So reparations is great. Fuck yeah, I want some money. I ain't gonna even lie.
Yeah.
But at the
But
same
it's not
time,
gonna heal.
it's not gonna
It's
heal.
not gonna heal anything.
Exactly, because now you got single family homes. You got even a lot of people don't address how the mental health of a black man. So all of these things are repercussions of.
And I low
what
key
has
wanted to
happened.
bring that mental health issue up when we was talking about the fatherhood thing too. But that's a whole nother
I
conversation.
mean, it all ties in because I think when we're thinking about reparations, we're also thinking about how we can put our structures back together in ways that will be stable, right? And so when we're talking reparations, we're saying something was taken from us that will help our family structures going forward, help our family legacies. And when we're thinking about wealth, all those things are tied together. But I think the interesting thing with that is I think a lot of us don't know what we actually want or what was actually taken from us and how to quantify that. And I think that's
why I asked that question initially.
Well, there's so many see, what a lot of people don't realize too, what the damage wasn't so much slavery itself, but was the Jim Crow and racist policies that were a result of millions of people being led into the labor market. You have to understand, after slavery ended in 1864, it was a an influx of labor into the labor market. So now you had whites competing with blacks for jobs and competing with former slaves for jobs, which made, and at the time we did not have a federal currency. So we had a lot of bank panic. We had a lot of currency serious situations where as a country we were going through a huge depression. From the 1860s well into the early 1900s.
Wow.
So what people don't realize too is a lot of our history as Black people in this country is really tied to its economic history directly. And a lot of the Ku Klux Klan and a lot of the racist policies that came to be, quite frankly, were put in place basically because there was a concerted effort, and some say might even be, state sanctioned effort to keep Black people in a certain economic place.
Yes.
So it's not just, so for instance, whether you have redlining where we couldn't participate in one of the largest real estate.
And that's what I was just about to bring up.
Appreciations in the history of man after World War II, and everyone came home in the 40s, from the 40s to the 70s. Because of racist redlining practices, Black people were not able to participate in that wealth-generating activity. Secondly, you look at situations, there was an article written in The Atlantic where there was close to 800,000 acres of, 800,000 acres of land in Mississippi, for instance, that was taken from Black farmers in the 1950s due to very questionable loan practices and things of that nature.
I just heard about
and that land to this day is
information not too long ago.
That land to this day, if it was kept in those Black families, would have been worth $60-70 billion.
Wow.
Just in those 25,000 Black farmers that the land was taken from. Yes.
Wow.
So it's examples.
How much did you say? Can you repeat that?
$60 billion
with a B.
Because of the industrial farming complex that exists in the South now, if that land had remained in Black families, and let's just say they sold
information like 2 weeks ago,
or things of that nature, then yes, they would have participated in another wealth generating exercise. That once again shows how there has been a systemic, resolve to limit African Americans'
our ability
economic
to just be ourselves.
Well, it's not about being. You have to understand, capitalism is based upon allocation of resource. Yeah. So it really has nothing to do with us per se, as if to say, but there is a scramble for resources.
Yeah.
Right.
So because of that, we tend to suffer because we don't quite understand the game that we're playing with. That we're involved with, particularly when it comes to just American capitalism. We don't understand capitalism. We've never really participated. We've never really been a part of it. We really don't understand its
We were just the backbone.
We were
That was
labor.
it.
We
Right.
We weren't supposed to be seen.
No. Well, we weren't supposed to participate in that way. We were an input, not an output.
So, Joe, how do we go? We were talking kind of earlier about this. How do we get our folks out of that mind frame where it's like break us off a check and we'll take it off from there, where we kind of really need other things? I mean, honestly, for me, like somebody was like, you want the student loan gotten rid of? Like, I'm with it.
Yeah.
But how do we get ourselves out of getting out of that thinking?
Well, it's interesting.
Off a check?
Yeah, when I went to University of Chicago for business school, so I sit up and I had white colleagues, and I'd always kind of address this from a very logical standpoint, just based on solely on the free labor part of it, right? Because that's a conversation you can have that lacks the emotion or takes kind of the race out of it, right? Because now you're just dealing with, all right, 250 years of free labor. What does that look like?
Oh,
well, give me a value. We could get census numbers. I think the first census was in 1810 or 1820.
Oh.
So we can actually get numbers of how many slaves were in the country during that time period. We also could probably triangulate with some insurance records closer to the mid 1800s. So we can pretty much peg how many people were here.
So is that
and then from there so of course, that's funny. My wife was funny. They're like, well, there was room and board. I was like, all right, we can subtract that.
Yeah.
Right. We'll subtract that. Land on the cot.
We were having a logical,
she gave her input on that. No, but fam.
It wasn't no cot back then.
But for real,
on the floor.
So we were having a very intellectually driven conversation around just quantifying.
The numbers.
Yeah. No. And that's a number. That's a number. It's like, y'all stayed on the estate. What did that mean? What did this mean?
Right.
But no.
So we're having just a logical conversation.
That's very logical.
But taking this to another space, right? So when Joe Biden was questioned about reparations,
right,
he said we need to do the research.
Right.
And he was kind of killed on that. And you kind of presented an argument to where maybe we do.
First of all, we have to understand.
Research.
Let's be real. Like,
okay,
the level of white guilt that exists when you start talking about slavery and the economic and socioeconomic impact of slavery on America. You start to dig into a place that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
True.
And so
Fair.
usually this conversation ends with, oh, well, that was so long ago.
Yep.
Wow, y'all mad? You still mad?
But see, that's fighting words.
You still mad?
Them
You
fighting
still
words.
mad?
But no, but you have,
Period.
But let's be honest. My grandmother's grandmother was a slave. My grandmother just passed away 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So as of this time last year, there was a living person in my family who could tell me
of
the other person who was the slave.
Yeah.
And had met her.
Huh.
So that's not that long
not
ago.
that far removed.
When I have a relative that's seen our last relative that was a slave.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we talking about? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the deflection game, right? To avoid really talking about
Accountability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just point out, and this is something that y'all brought up Joe Biden. So I'm gonna bring up Barack Obama.
Go ahead.
So y'all know Barack Obama, when he was doing his presidential election, didn't believe in reparations at all. And that is,
well, he wasn't raised like a black man.
that's his, I'm just saying, I'm gonna throw that out there because we so pro Obama, but I don't.
We done gave him Michelle though. Like low key, Michelle gave him his Q rating.
Of course. But we talking about reparations, right?
Fair.
So I'm talking about his belief system, what he believed in. Like we're so, no one wants to talk about the things, the other side of Obama, that what his, what some of his belief systems are. Him and Hillary actually agreed on that.
Yes.
And so now, what I just read about too was Bernie Sanders is behind a couple of different, I think, senators and congressmen. They're trying to push for reparations for 2020 election. And so now what's happening, how the hell Bernie Sanders behind it? And we ain't even get Obama behind it. I mean, again, you got to think, we put him in office.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Like, yes, he doesn't have to believe in it because he wasn't raised like us.
Right.
And that brings up the whole fact of African versus Black American,
Correct.
African American, and they already know that there's a distinction. So we can talk about that. That's a whole other podcast subject to me.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the fact that he doesn't believe in reparations, why do you?
Well, a lot of black folks don't.
Okay.
And I think the thing is, the counter argument is you can't put a price on that. Who do you pay? What is paid? Or how is the form of that compensation? I guess since that's the term we use. What does that look like? When you start really peeling that onion back, there's too many unanswered questions. People see it, and it's too. Then they throw in it's too long ago, and then they put it on the shelf. Well, that's kind of how it's always tabled.
Well, Native Americans, I remember doing a show at the freaking Mohegan Sun,
right?
And literally, I'm being escorted to the venue, and I'm being told, this benefits Native Americans, a certain percentage of this casino, and many of the casinos in New England and the Northeast benefit Native Americans. And I'm saying,
as it should.
As much as that was put in place, why can't that be put in place for African Americans?
Because this establishment,
for sure.
This establishment is not threatened by the economic empowerment of Native Americans. They are threatened by.
What's
the
your
economic
point, Ab?
empowerment
Though
of Black Americans.
you seem like you itching to say something. What's going on, bro?
I think my point about that was the House, when they had the House hearing about reparations. You had Ta-Nehisi Coates, you had Julianne Monroe, you had all the other folks who were kind of pro reparations, other folks who weren't. And I know me and Joe were talking earlier about how it's a conversation where it's how it's been looked at is yes or no. But I think at the same time, a lot of folks are very prideful and they don't want a handout, and they look at this as a negative way, as a handout. And other folks were like, "Shit, you break me off," so definitely something where it's you should make a choice if you want it or not.
You bring a good topic. Who should break?
Who should be broke off?
Who should be broke off? And who should be doing the breaking off?
So that goes back to what you were saying earlier about the research.
Right. Well, I can tell you who it is. It's most of the banks.
Yeah.
It's most,
Chase.
if not all, the insurance companies. some of the agriculture companies.
A lot of
It's
it.
all the basic industry that existed and was rooted at that time in the country. Because everything that was around that time was affected or profited from slavery. Whether it was the cotton trade, whether it was the
Law enforcement.
right. I mean, law enforcement started based on making sure to keep the runaway slaves.
Slaves,
That's
right.
what militias initially were created specifically for
Bounty
that.
hunters.
Wow.
Yeah.
To detain
So
slaves.
America's entire law enforcement system was solely based around catching escaped slaves.
Wow.
And maintaining slave ownership.
Which hasn't changed in their, which has not
In one way
changed
or another.
in their culture.
It's the culture, though.
That's their culture.
And now to speak to Briahna's point, we got 3.5 million people incarcerated in prison right now in this country. Guess how many slaves there were in 1864? Close to 3.5 million. So, so maybe
Don't make me mad.
The new Jim Crow.
I hope y'all watching YouTube because we dropping some jewels right
I mean,
now.
no,
it's
it
real.
makes
It's very
sense.
real.
American capitalism can only.
Man,
No, but you got it
You have
going.
to remember though. Now
You got it going.
This is an experiment.
Word.
So, in order for this experiment to work, it had to be designed a certain kind of way economically. The only reason why this country could get so wealthy so fast, so young, was to have a system that it had in place where you had to exploit
Something or someone.
Or something.
There had to be some free element to it too.
Correct.
Shit.
Yeah.
Because even
So this all
When
was
you
by
think
design.
about 200 years,
Right.
like I've
Put
been
me
working
on
all my
game,
life.
boy.
Really, it was
200
it was technically 250 because it was 1619 and then 1864 was the end.
200 years of
So
free
about
labor,
250.
you better cash out.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I mean, but the reality of it is though, is like, yo,
That's about, you figure that's like 9-10 generations. I think 10 generations of
Yes.
families.
Yeah, and that number 10 times more.
Yeah.
man.
So that's just it's too calculated. But when you put it in the perspective of numbers, now I'm very curious, and now I'm like, wait a minute.
Are you talking about trillions of dollars?
But
Right.
Yes,
So
but
much is quantified. We saw what happened with Colin Kaepernick and with the NFL, where they basically broke him off because of what happened with him being blackballed. And the
he's
amount
a
of
rap
players.
now.
And
He's a rap.
we put monetary things on other stuff. When if I go out in the street here in a pothole and slip and fall and bust my head, like I'm suing the city, they're gonna break me off a check, and they already have it calculated. How much
How much that's worth.
I think
Well, yeah,
I
based
think
on
I
your
have.
age, your occupation, your education. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
So that's what I think kind of where it's at, where we need to start having that conversation where it's like, what you were saying, like who gets broke off and how much or who's responsible.
Who's responsible? The responsibility lies on anyone who been. That's why it's funny. White people say, "Oh, that wasn't me. Like, I didn't own slaves."
Like,
Now, we'll say this though. Only 1% of white Americans own slaves. And see, a lot of people don't know that.
Wow, that I did not know.
You had to be
1%.
Only 1% of
had to be in position.
Irish, right?
Well, no, it wasn't it's the same 1% that everybody talks about today. It was the
time.
wealthiest 1% of
The
Americans.
Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and it's another white family.
But G,
So the everyday white person in America did not own slaves.
But Jewel, what I was thinking about is literally the Brits sent over their criminals. Like that's who
Australia
created
started.
America.
Well, no, okay, so
Or
hold
the
up.
people who got kind of excommunicated.
You kind of mix this. Yeah, that's true.
No,
I mean, no, that's true.
But there were individuals that were trying to escape.
There was indentured servitude. There were different forms of bondage.
I'm always
Definitely.
trying to
So it's kind of ill to think about like the people who didn't succeed in the UK came over to the US and then many times became rich.
Well, it was the
And
Wild Wild
figured
West.
it out.
was
It's
the
like,
free
yo, I'm a
world.
criminal already. And once I get out of this indentured servitude, I'm gonna figure it out.
It was a lawless land. Think about America in the early 1800s.
I couldn't imagine.
It was like a lawless land.
Yeah.
It was going down.
Yeah.
No camera phone.
Just the colonies and
colonies, yeah, man.
I mean, and then the further west you got,
about all
the
the
wilder it
stuff
got, because you remember now, I can't remember when the Louisiana Purchase was, but we didn't even own anything past the Mississippi. So once you got out of that over Appalachia, kind of into the plains, it was cracking. And if you wasn't cool with them Native Americans, you was going to have a problem.
Right.
yeah.
But that's my point. They were able to create some type of infrastructure too, and I think that's the other thing is that a lot of people say we weren't here. We were actually here. Some of us were already here.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? And people again don't know that. So yes, this is our land.
And a lot of and some of us were not slaves.
Exactly.
There were some of us that were free too. So that's the conversation gets very complicated when you talk reparations. Just even around that, like who benefits, who was really, you know what I'm saying?
But I guess to bring it like kind of to a head and thinking about like, okay, we're coming to the table with something like, who are the people that should be meeting to even think about what we should be getting? Like, who are these people? Who are the delegates that should be sitting at the table?
Having this actual conversation.
Oh man, you could bring in actual scientists and economists.
Economists, to calculate
they can calculate the numbers.
Word.
The data's there. You have the census.
Yeah.
I mean, you can figure out. We could get to the number.
Right.
Get into the number ain't the hard part. The hard part is who pays that.
Who pays it?
Yeah.
Because see, some people are going to say, "Well, the U.S. government shouldn't be responsible."
And for how long?
Well, for how long? In what form of payment?
I'm just trying to figure out how they got money to give every other race money but us.
Well, because so
they owe
many.
us too much.
It's so much. It's so much.
You know what? Just give us the country.
Well, no, I mean,
$1 trillion.
And a lot of what we lost wasn't based around slavery. What happened 100 years after slavery?
Yeah,
it was all of the bad land trusts, all of the bad mortgages,
the stuff we lost.
The stuff we lost. It was a lack of participation in the American economy.
I just want to know that really got us to where we are now. Back in 1800 to somebody. Like, it's like, how do you determine that I got to pay you for my land?
Right.
You get what I mean?
Because a lot of our families owned
it already.
Yeah.
So why I got to pay you all of a sudden for something that my mama wasn't paying at the time, but we own this.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? So that it gets very intricate. You know what I mean? Because it is about capitalism.
It is.
Where you made me feel like I got to pay something. And again, if you fast forward to how we think, it's very calculated based on how we grew up and how our infrastructure was. Like, why I gotta pay a damn bank institution? Like, how you own the bank?
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying? How did it get in place?
Well, not to get deep. Currency is the gift of Europeans.
Word.
Yeah.
So before currency, it was gold.
Right.
It was precious. It was traded.
Trade and barter.
Yeah.
Trade and barter.
Currency was created as a more efficient form of medium of economy, a transaction. But it's really how it says the trick. It was the biggest trick ever.
Word.
Because that dollar in your pocket, it's a piece of paper.
Yep.
Literally. Well, and I mean the value of the dollar.
So not to get all the way too deep.
No, it's cool.
Right, no, I appreciate all these dudes. Appreciate all these.
Let it rock.
The same people who own the slaves.
I'm like this. Yes,
the
man.
1%. I'm seeing we have to be very careful because black people. Let me tell you a funny story. I lived in Africa for a while. I was out hanging out. There was an African girl who was like going to throw me some rhythm, and it was this brother from like Angola or something, and he wasn't feeling. He's like, "Oh man, I don't even know why you even like American men. Like we sold them. They were the misfits." This is a brother saying this.
I'm just saying. These Africans. I'm just saying.
Joey said it's a brother saying this.
Yeah. Brother,
of course.
He's African.
We're African American.
Right.
And see, that's another thing too. We're not African American, y'all. We are Americans.
We are Americans.
Because I lived in Africa.
Yeah.
It ain't nothing African about us.
Right.
Now you do see genetic ties to like our music and like our culture. But we don't know. None of us know any African languages. None of us know any African religions. Because you have to understand, at the end of the day, we've been so far removed for so long.
Yes, bro.
We have no more, other than our genetic culture.
No connectivity. None.
No more tie to the white boy from Boston.
Exactly. Oh, my God. This motherfucker right here.
That's wild.
Dropping them jewels on us.
But can I say this? We agree all that reparations are kind of needed at this point.
It's a legitimate topic that needs to be discussed and needs to be dealt with. Yes.
And it has to be discussed in some form. Yes, absolutely.
It needs to be discussed.
There has to be a leveling of the playing field. There has to be
y'all know what's going to happen if the playing get level. Come on.
Exactly.
And that's why we sit here talking about reparations. We can end the conversation like that. Well, no, it's over. It's over.
Well, first of all, I don't want to. I'm not trying to go Elijah Muhammad. I'm not going Elijah Muhammad.
No, don't worry.
But here's the deal. At the end of the day, this entire planet is browning.
Word,
everything is getting more brown.
Word.
If you look at
we'll be all day talking about.
No, Time Magazine. I remember Time Magazine did that whole thing, and they said this is the face of the future.
Yeah.
And the face of the future looks partially Korean, partially Mexican, partially Puerto Rican, partially African American, and
it
so
don't look white.
Right.
It's definitely not
Right.
because that's why they're scared.
But y'all have to understand, like, it is the reason why, and I'm not finna go there, but that's why you got all this integration going on.
Yeah.
And it ain't bad. It's just that y'all gotta think the value of our bodies, the value of our melanin, but also like the percentage of white families that are producing and having kids is way lower.
Way down.
Yeah, so it's eventually gonna happen like that. It's our genetics are very much needed.
That's why they're scared.
For this entire world.
They have it since the beginning.
That.
Yeah,
exactly.
And to circle this whole conversation back, power in America is because it's a capitalist society is determined by capital. Until we as Black people learn how to allocate and how to properly leverage our capital, we're going to continue to be in the situation that we're in.
That's right.
And those reparations can help us facilitate that. But quite frankly, we have the ability now to do it with or without reparations. Quite frankly. And so that's where I think we really have to have those conversations. Like those
conversations.
Because to me, reparations is stuff like, if I were to look at it and quantify reparations, I'd want community trust that invests in mental health.
Word.
Education and
I need your phone number, fam.
No, it's so real. It's so real.
Education and housing.
Yeah.
And housing. You know what I mean? Because I think those are three things that we need in order to continue to.
They just closed the mental health hospital in my town.
Definitely.
Well, they've been closing community mental health all over. I mean, they closed 2 centers here in Chicago, and it's just an interesting thing. Like community mental health is now turned into the incarceration system, but that's a whole different situation.
Well, because it's more valuable to the state for you to be incarcerated than for you to seek mental treatment, right? Because now you can have free labor.
Word.
But for the interest of time, for the interest of time, I want you all. If this has been a super duper spirited conversation.
Yes.
I didn't even know what to expect, and like we went overtime, which is fine, but it's gonna be dope. You know? No, not at all.
Nah, this is what I study. Like, I'm an economist, so
this has been what it needs to be, and it's what people need to hear. And I have no qualms about that. You wouldn't have been invited to the show if it wasn't for that. You know what I'm saying? And so the reality of it is just I want you guys to take the small jewels that we've presented today, and hopefully we can continue this conversation. Whether it be on social media, whether it be just amongst your friends, your personal contacts, whatever. But we need to think more about what reparations means to us and not just be throwing that around as an empty, loose term and debates and conversations. And so, hopefully this episode has sparked some conversation amongst y'all. Please hit us up on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, wherever, Twitter as well. And we are the Go Defenders. We're signing out. Me boy Naledge Born. We got 2 guests and Mario, Jeff. You got to bring your asses back.
Bye, y'all.
Later.
Peace.
Later.